Importans this time. I know it says Irradiance Particles here, but it's really talking about the Importans, even though it says Irradiance Particles. So we've got 30,309 Importans here, but we do have 500 rays, and those 500 rays have to work with those 30,000 Radiance Particles, or Importans I should say. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause the video, and I'll come back when this is finished, and we'll compare the two images and see what we got. Alright, it just finished. Let me go ahead and hide the output window, and whoa, look what we got here. Very, very interesting. All the artifacting went away. We have ourselves a pretty clean render. I mean, the only thing left now is to increase the anti-aliasing, and that's it. We'll have ourselves a good render. So we can see that we got rid of all the artifacting on the edges of the floor, the ceiling, and most definitely the most notable difference is the walls. The walls are not filled with all those artifacts from before. And surprisingly enough, this render time was only 2 minutes and 24 seconds. Interesting. So here's the before, and here's the after. In the before render, it took longer to render, and the quality was unacceptable. The quality was so bad that it was totally unacceptable, has to be thrown away, and the work has to be done again. With the new render, the time for rendering was faster, and the quality was better. So as you can see, when you're familiar with these settings, and you know exactly how to tweak them, and what to do with them, you can go ahead and squeeze out not just quality, but performance. You can render out faster and better when you know exactly what it is that you're doing here. So the trick is to use the least amount of Importans possible. If you see you have any artifacts here or something's unacceptable, start to increase the density by very small amounts. You don't want to increase it by too much. You don't want to go from 0.1, for example, all of a sudden to 0.5 or to 1. You want to increase maybe from 0.1, maybe to 0.2, maybe to 0.15. Small numbers are your friend here because they're going to go ahead and introduce just the right amount of Importans for your scene. And for rays, we always have to use a pretty high number of rays to get ourselves an artifact-free render. And although you may not like the sounds of that, the truth is that a high number of rays doesn't equal long render times. It's a high number of density that equals high render times. Fortunately, the density doesn't impact the quality as much as the rays. So we can actually get away with rendering an image with a low density and a high number of rays as opposed to rendering out with a high density and a low number of rays. So that's the trick. Low density, just enough Importans for the scene to render out nicely, and a high number of rays to get rid of any artifacts that just show up. And those are all very important things to keep in mind and remember every time you work with Irradiance Particles. Because if you don't, you're going to end up running into situations where you may not be using the most optimal settings for your scene, and that could mean the difference between rendering in 2 minutes and rendering in 20 minutes, or rendering in 30 minutes. So, very important, and keep that in mind. Okay, so I'm going to end this video here, and in the next video we're going to talk about these environment parameters down here a little more in depth, and see how they work, how to tweak them, and what we can do with them. So I'll see you then.